Everyone, we will go ahead and get started. Let me call to order this work session of the Mayor and Commission. Today is Monday, July 31st, 2023. The time is 9:01 a.m. And the first item is, thank you, to be from Palm Trend, but I don't see them here.
Good morning.
Oh, you are? Okay, all right. Ms. Johnson, you didn't tell me. Okay. She said y'all weren't here.
I stand corrected. I was told it was going to be presented by Clinton Forbes, the executive director, so I
Okay.
didn't recognize you.
Okay, do you want to start or you want to wait for him?
If we can wait for him a few minutes.
All right, we're going to go to the other items on the agenda then. Can we do that, Ms. Johnson? Keep it
Absolutely.
moving? Okay. Yeah. What is your name, sir?
Yash.
Yash? Thank you, Yash. Okay, so we'll start then with item 2, Clematis Street Real Estate Report and Discussion. Is Mr. Rook here? Okay,
He was a moment ago.
Yep, right there. He's coming in.
okay.
There he is.
Sorry, Chris, we're moving up because of Palm Trend. So if you don't mind going ahead. It's a Monday morning, everyone.
It is Monday morning.
Let's pivot.
Early.
Yeah, let's keep it rolling. Okay.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, I just ran down the stairs because I had to get my coat. So
Sorry.
that's why I'm out of breath. I hope everybody had a great weekend. My name is Christopher Rug. I'm the executive director of the Community Redevelopment Agency. And today I wanted to bring forward the topic of 314 Clematis Street. As you all know, board members, this is an asset that the CRA has owned now for some time. And we've had several proposals that have been submitted to us, but none of them have met the direction that the board has set. In addition, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as I go through the presentation, in addition to the proposals not really meeting expectations, there has also been some conflicting information coming from just what's happening in the market, which has also made it a bit challenging to really understand the best way to move forward. So over the past few months, we have secured a consultant, namely BDO, who is here with us today, to put together some fresh data on this asset and to give us some idea of options that are available based on that market information. And then the goal of today is really to get some direction on what we want to do with this asset moving forward so that we can make sure that it is active and just vibrant on Clematis Street. So I'm just going to do a quick overview. I am going to go talk a little bit more in detail about the timeline of actions. Then I will turn it over to our consultants, which is Seth and Stephen from BDO, who are here with us today, discuss some of those options that they have outlined, and then discussion and direction from the board. So just for those watching, 314 Clematis Street is located on the 300 block of Clematis Street in the heart of downtown. City Hall is in the top left corner, and DramaWorks is in the top right. And this really great building is located between Dixie and Olive Avenue. So if you walk straight down to the waterfront, you would walk right past this building. It's approximately 29,000 square feet, roughly 13,000 square feet on each, the first and second floor, two-story building that was built quite a while ago. I think it's about 100 years, a 100-year-old building, so it's been added on to. And it's currently in a state that requires work. So as the picture shows, that's currently how the ground floor looks. The second floor is more usable. Those spaces up there they have walls and everything is available for leasing. So the CRA purchased the building back in 2019 for $7.5 million. We've had a series of expenses since we've purchased it. However, fortunately, we have had net income of $268,000 on this asset. However, I did want to note that this is the final month of one of our tenants, and they will not be renewing our lease. So once that lease expires, that will have an impact on the net income generating out of this asset. And then there are questions about that we've had in the past, and this is just basically a recap of some of the dollars that we spent prior to us owning the building, and that was a project that we were working on with the private sector. So that is essentially everything that we have spent on this building to date. So going over the timelines of actions, when we were going out to price out building out the building as under the direction to do some small business incubators and things like that, the 12 for 12 project that many of you may recall. When we were pricing out the structure, that's really when the private sector started responding back to us saying, really, city, if you're looking to do this, there's a lot of interest in the private sector to renovate this building that could save you quite a bit of funds. Shortly thereafter, and also to note, we were trying to do a build out of $100 a square foot or less, and we weren't really able to achieve that. So because of that, and the interest from the private sector, we received an offer from a local developer to purchase the building. There were also several other proposals that had mentioned interest, and then through just subsequent other meetings, all of it kind of fell through until we reissued an offer to dispose of the building, and none of those offers met the direction that the board had set. And then since that time, that is when we've been gathering the fresh data, employing BDO services to help us get some sort of current market analysis of what's happening and some options on how to move forward. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over now to Seth and Steve. Seth is the Director of Valuation and Capital Market Analysis from BDO, and Steven is the Principal and Head of Real Estate Valuation Practice from BDO. So, Seth? Steve, I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. So my name is Stephen Kurtz. I am a principal at BDO. I lead the National Real Estate Valuation Practice at BDO. I've been a real estate appraiser for more than 30 years at this point. I am an MAI. I'm a state certified general real estate appraiser in the state of Florida. I've been doing this for a long time. I work primarily with, we don't do mortgage appraisals. We work primarily with investors and owners and developers and redevelopers. We do highest and best use studies all the time. And we were asked to take a look at the property here to get an understanding of what the potential market value is and what strategy for marketing the property to yield the highest value for the city. One thing that I wanted to say before we start talking about specifically the property is to understand what's happening in the real estate market today. West Palm Beach is in high demand. Clematis is obviously one of the trophy locations. It will always attract investor interest. The building itself is historic, so there's some preservation issues with the facade, but it's in a wonderful location and it's a wonderful potential building. Understanding what's happening in the real estate market, over the past 18 months, interest rates have gone from practically 0 to 5.5%. We are anticipating probably another 0.25% increase from the Fed. What does that all mean? What it means is that the cost of borrowing money in the market for real estate investors has completely changed. And whereas getting a loan at almost nothing increases the yield for an investor. And what's even more important to understand about that is that at the moment, banks are unwilling to lend. And the part of the problem is the uncertainty with the market, uncertainty with how real estate markets are going to be changing. And also, if you make a loan at, say, 4.5%, and 6 months later, it's now 5.5%, that loan you have on your books is worth less. So the markets are pretty frozen. The people who are out there in the market buying right now are purchasing properties with cash. And a developer who has the means to come in and buy a property like 314 with cash has an advantage. And in order to maximize the value here, what we need to look for is, if we're going to be selling this directly into the market, is a developer. So the first option we looked at is, can we sell this property as is, where is? As a 2-story building, retail on the ground floor, office, 1 floor of office above it. And one thing you have to understand about that office is that the windows, particularly on the front facade, are not great. So you're not going to get a lot of natural light there. And it's our opinion, looking at the comparables in the market and what we understand about investors going into the market, is that you probably could yield maybe $6.5 million to $7.3 million in the market. But that's not really the way that we're recommending you go to the market with this property. Second way to look at it is, let's do retail on the ground floor. There is, by the way, significant interest in owner users in office here. It's a wonderful location to have your address, to live and work. But we looked at doing a restaurant on the second floor, retail, or possibly both. Those are expensive renovations. If we just kept it as a 2-story property, we're probably not going to be able to yield much more value. What the real value that we see in this is, putting ourselves in the shoes of an investor coming to look at the property, is really as a redevelopment property. As of right, you can build 5 stories in this zone. So preserving the ground floor, preserving the second floor and the historic facade, looking at the property as either retail, restaurant with offices above, or with multifamily residential above, would yield the developer the best value. And it's our opinion that the value would be at least $9.6 million. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all that you can get in the market. We're recommending that if you went to the market with a plan like this, being very upfront that we're seeking developers to be able to come in and purchase the property, we're looking at $10 million or so in value. One last thing before I pass it off to Seth. On the market, which I forgot to say earlier, one thing you have to understand about the market as well is that transaction volume in West Palm Beach for all types of commercial real estate is half what it was last year. So we're in a difficult position, a difficult time. There needs to be a little bit of patience here, I think, in order to yield the best value. That's pretty much it. I'll pass it off to Seth.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having us. Again, my name is Seth Miller-Gabriel. I co-lead BDO's Infrastructure and Public-Private Partnerships team. I can't say quite as long, but it's all right. I've been doing public-private partnerships for about 20 years in the U.S., and for many years I ran the P3 office for the District of Columbia. So as part of this analysis, we looked at all the options beyond just real estate of how do you go to market with this. So what kind of possible procurement pathways forward? We looked at several from monetization, which is the sale, which Steve just described, of possible options and upside for that. A lease to own, master lease agreement, long-term lease agreement, where you could do different multiple subleases, and then an innovative project delivery or P3 model. Out of all of those, our recommendations would be to you to really consider 2. One, the monetization, as Steve said, looking at those real numbers, if the city of West Palm Beach is to dispose of, in using those terms, of the building itself. Just sell it to the private partner, they develop it, you move forward and help revitalize that part of downtown. Secondary option, we look at some sort of innovative project delivery or P3, which could be as simple as a lease-to-own option, where you have a long-term agreement with a private partner who leases the building from you. They invest their own capital to renovate the building, and at some point you have a sale or transfer at a predetermined price, all the way up to a full public-private partnership where the city controls the building. You still own it. You just have a private partner who is operating and working on it on a long-term agreement. While I'm a P3 person, in this instance, I actually would be, my humble opinion, advise you to look very strongly at the full monetization. With a P3, well, it has a lot of upside. You can do a lot of innovative things in it. You have to remember that every policy goal you put onto a facility like this will ultimately cost money. It will lower the revenue that the city itself receives because you're then telling the private partner, well, we want the following things. Those things do cost money, and so they would lower the purchase price ultimately for you. So it's a real balance for you between, are you looking for the maximum value, or are you looking for a value plus some policy goals? There's no easy answer in this. As Steve said, right now it is a difficult real estate market. You're fortunate. You live in your city's very strong, very attractive for real estate. You're doing better than Washington, D.C. right now, I can tell you that. Where I live, it's a tough market all around for this kind of real estate. So be very careful and be mindful and thoughtful about it, because what are the goals you have now? What do you want to look forward to? You have all these options, as you can see on the table, and be very happy to explore those with you further. You just have to decide what you want to do right now, what's the best interest of the city, whether it's a sale or something a little bit more. A lot of good things you can do with this site. It's beautiful. We were there this morning and last night. You're doing great things on that street. It's just, how do you take this property and really make it a real asset to the city? On that, we'll turn it back over, but we're here for any questions.
So as I mentioned earlier, and actually before I get into this last slide, which it basically just outlines some timelines and moving forward, we still continue to get calls from the private sector about partnering on this structure in a variety of ways. So that's the good news, is that we are still getting calls. I think over the past month, I've gotten 3 different calls from the private sector individuals inquiring about the structure and also suggesting different things that many of which are recommendations that have also been presented by BDO. So that's the good news, is that I do believe we could achieve one of the partners. So the idea today is to get some recommending that we, under one of the options, we do reissue that notice of disposal and get fresh proposals. We would do that in a variety of ways. And then under that direction, the proposed timeline is roughly outlined to the right, where I believe we could have some agreements brought before the board before the end of the year, if there is something that matches what the board's desire is to use that use that asset for at 314 Clematis. So that concludes the presentation, Mayor, Commissioners. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Stephen and Seth. Can somebody give me an idea as to what it would cost to take this to market if we chose the monetization option? Are you just saying that we kind of put it out there as is, and looking at, I think you could go back to that slide, I think the options are 6 million to 75, 7.5, 6.4 to 7.5, is that 7.3? So choosing that option, we wouldn't put any more money into it, correct?
Correct, except for carrying costs.
Okay. But if we wanted to have some control over the look or feel of the property going forward, that would not be the best option. We would have to go with one of the other two. I mean, if we didn't care what that property looked like or what, somebody used it for, that would be the option. But if we do still want to have some control, some sense as to what the purpose would be, what it would look like, then we're going to have to go with one of the other options. Am I reading this correctly?
Now, of course, if you monetize, if you sell the property, you have all your local ordinances and laws. So you do have that control, of course, and zoning. So you have that ability through that legal means of dictating operations and what happens at that building. The other options, I'll call it the P3 option, but that term is used for everything now. So the innovative option is if the city wanted to maintain ownership of the building, whether in a short term with some sort of lease to own operation where you would be working with a private partner where they'd be leasing it, but they would be investing their own capital again to renovate it with the ultimate goal of the city selling it to that partner at some point, or you had a long-term agreement where there's a long-term P3 agreement essentially where the city would maintain ownership, the private partner would invest capital, you would work with them, and they would generate revenue that might have some share, but would really work out, of course, for some economic development there. Again, that model, while it is good in a lot of cases, for this case would generate less revenue for the city ultimately. So it's that balance. I would say that if you're going to go down the monetization route, you can make it very clear what your intentions are while you do that when you post a property of saying, well, this is kind of what we're looking for. I'll go on. I probably talked too far out, but looking at the businesses around the building, I mean, it's an entertainment district. It's resident. It's not as residential. It's more restaurants and those kind of shops. So I imagine that would be the sort of investor that you would attract.
So what would maximize the return? Is it the go-to-market recommended? Go-to-market, that's a version of the P3? Am I interpreting this chart correctly?
Yeah, the recommendation is to, when you do, if you do choose to go to market, right, to dispose of the property, is to make sure that it's clear that you understand the development potential of the property, that there's additional development that can be that can be vertically above the base 2 stories. One other way to exert control there through zoning process is to offer even more density, so more height, so that would enhance the value, but you could put conditions on that as well.
I'm trying to figure out the ranges.
Yeah.
So the lowest would be just to put it on the market as is, right?
Correct.
And I'm trying to understand what would maximize the value of the property. What option would maximize the value? I'm looking at something called go-to-market, which would take us up to 10 million, but I don't know what that means. So explain that to me.
Right. So it would be either an additional stories of residential or of office above the existing 2 stories.
Are you recommending any minimum number of stories, or that's just up to us?
The zoning has a maximum. So we're only.
What's the
we're only
maximum now?
doing
5?
It's 4, actually.
4?
Yeah,
5.
5 is the maximum allowed by zoning.
Okay.
4. Okay.
So you're saying add the additional stories and
Correct.
put it out. Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah. To put a finer point on that, if the city grants the ability for that building to be maximized, the square footage, which you can do because you're the ones who grant that through zoning, then you're going to maximize your revenue.
Okay.
potential.
All right. So that's what you're saying. If we put it on the market with the clear understanding there could be 3 additional stories there, that's how we can maximize.
Correct. Because then your potential buyers are going to see, oh, this building has now been,
Okay, all
I'll
right.
say upzoned, but it's maximized zone, that the city has cleared all that, and that you are a seller who has the ability to grant that authority, and that you will.
All right. Very good. Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you. Just a brief follow-up on that. You haven't looked into the engineering of doing something like that. I mean, can that structure of the bottom floors support, going up, or would you have to completely rebuild the whole structure? Can you use existing and put 2 or 3 more floors on it?
So, if I may, Commissioner, so they did not do an engineering analysis. That wasn't part of the scope. But the building, the only engineering analysis that we've done was looking at the footers of the building, and the building is sound in its current condition. To add additional stories, I mean, we would need some type of engineering analysis to understand if it could support additional structures or if it would need to be reinforced.
Follow-up? That could significantly increase the value then if we could do an engineering study and find that the building indeed would support 2 additional floors. I would think that as long as we had solid engineering reports, then it could increase the value of the current building, knowing that they wouldn't have to re-engineer it or completely knock it down and rebuild it.
Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. So I'm appreciative of this look and looking at the monetization of it and what brings in the highest monetary value to the city, but I'm thinking about why we initially bought this building. And, you know, I realize, because I was recently walking up and down Clematis on the weekend and enjoying popping into some of the shops and the restaurants, and then there's this, you know, space of non-activation and non-use. And if we think about who might go in there, you know, we bought it to avoid these large nightclubs and, you know, different elements that we might not want on Clematis. And so I know that you were saying we could put some parameters due to zoning, but I don't think that, I mean, maybe we say, you know, and I don't know what limitations we can put on for nightclubs with zoning, but we had talked about small businesses being in there, something that would create more activation, more people on the street. And while maybe that wouldn't bring in the short term the most amount of money, it may yield more in the longer term.
Well, I think you're right, Commissioner. I believe that we should make it very clear to the marketplace what it is we like to see or what we don't want to see there. You're absolutely right. We bought this for a reason, and that was, I believe, to have some control over what it will look like and what it will be used for in the future. However, I think I don't want us to overly restrict our options. I think that we need to hear from the marketplace what it is that they could do if they had 3 additional stories there and come tell us, but leaving us the option of choosing. And I don't know how we do that. Maybe it's the way we frame the request for proposals, I don't know, whatever that document is. Put on the street, let the market tell us what it is so we know what our options are. But we should give them some sense as to what we don't want, whether it's a nightclub or whatever. That's just one thought. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the comps that you used to come up with this number, because although I'm not in the real estate business, I feel like, and I know that you mentioned a year ago that the climate was different, but when we went back in August or September of last year, we still had offers that were 9.5 million. And so I feel like a comp that is in Lake Worth or West Palm Beach, or there, in my opinion, as a downtown resident, there's not a comp for Clematis Street. So I'm just curious what you used to come up with this number.
So what we do is we go into the market and try to find similar economic areas. So we're trying to find as comparable as possible, and then using our judgment to adjust. So we went into the market, found the transactions that we felt were comparable, even if they weren't exactly
Do you have
local.
specifics that you can give us for what they
Yes,
were?
it's in our full report.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know when that's going to be. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, the report is in draft form, and so we should, I mean, you'll have it
I mean,
this
I'm just
week.
curious, are we talking about a comp in Lake Worth? Are we talking
No,
about
the
a comp
majority
in
of the comps
Wellington?
are,
Like,
yeah, the majority of the comps are in West Palm Beach. There's particularly a comp in Nora that I think is fairly good. We have some additional comparables that we've looked at. You know, we looked at things like, you know, 320, which is a complete redevelopment, 313, which is, you know, an interesting project, you know, purchased by the owner next door. We looked at 320, and I think there's another one on the 200 block that we looked at as well. There's a lot going on with each of these transactions and what their goals are and how they're structured. And, you know, the way we look at it is not just direct comps, but we're also modeling the building out of these scenarios, how much it will cost to build them out, and then what the residual value is, right? So what we think the value is of the property as completely built out with residential and retail, and then deducting the cost to get there, and that leaves us with a residual value, and that's the way an investor would look at the property.
All right, Commissioner Baduzzi.
Thank you. Just to follow up with that, the market conditions here in the city of West Palm Beach, the statement was made that transactions are down, that they're 50% what they were a year ago. Is that in general in the real estate market in Florida, United States, or are you looking directly at the city of West Palm Beach?
Yeah, so those statistics were specifically for West Palm Beach, but they are national. Transaction volume is down even more, actually, in general, and the availability of debt is just incredibly slim at the moment. It's a bad moment in the real estate market.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. Chris, I wonder can you tell us a little bit about what happened the second time we went out to bid? And I know that we received bids as high as 9.5 million. I would have still liked to have accepted those, but did we turn those down? Is there any reason we can't go back to those and see if they're still interested? Because I feel like we're going through this process for the third time, and a lot of the options we're talking about are the same options that we already went through twice last year. I mean, do we know that those bids that came in are not still available to us?
I have not reached out to them after we essentially rejected the proposals. The reason we is because they didn't meet the criteria. And in order to understand why, that's when we started looking at what was happening around the real estate market. Things were changing rapidly. And we really, it was kind of a quarter-to-quarter basis where things were just constantly in a state of movement, which then justified finding a real estate professional to give us a little bit more information on it. So we can always go back to those folks. However, because we didn't make it clear in, I think, the notice that we would entertain anything less than 10.5, I think that's why I was recommending going back out to make it clear about essentially what we would be considering, so that it is just sort of open and clear to everybody that may be interested in this. Only because if we did accept something less, we may have left other proposals that have great ideas on the table. So ultimately, I think if we just reissue, and it's also a completely different finance market or financial situation when it comes to just what's happening with real estate. I think a fresh notice of disposal and some clarity on what we want would be prudent.
Did you look at what the market would be if we leased it? I mean, I don't know what leasing, what we could recover per square foot, and how those numbers would play out.
So as part of our analysis to establish the pricing, we did determine rental rates for the property, but they're theoretical as redeveloped. We didn't look at the property in place, and we did not look at a master lease either.
All right. If we did go back out to the market, I would suggest that we include in there a master lease option, which might expand the potential universe of those interested. We would have to, I would say, put a floor on the amount that we would be interested in, so that we could recover something, even in interim, in the period, and maybe talk about a master lease with an option to purchase. I don't know. Just I'm trying to be as flexible as possible, but not. I don't want to just give away this property. But if there's a way to do a master lease which leads to an option, which includes an option to purchase, where we could see a return at the end of the day with a purpose that we are comfortable with, and see what the market, see what they tell us, at least as an option. I'd like to see that. Commissioner Beduzzi.
Thank you. And, maybe, at first hearing this, that it's not worth the 10 or over 10 necessarily anymore in this market, it was kind of depressing to hear that, but maybe we need to look at this as an opportunity. Before, the market was just on fire to where, we purchased it for $7.5 million and we could sell it for over 10, which made that option seem like maybe the way to go. But maybe if the building isn't worth what it once was, maybe the opportunity is there to do, as Commissioner Lambert suggested, and do a public-private partnership with us holding the asset, and presumably at some point maybe it goes back up in value, but maybe there is that opportunity because of the fact that we're not going to see a huge return in the market anymore like we were looking at just last year. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to think a little outside the box and do some sort of, public-private partnership or as the mayor said, a lease.
And by the way, I wasn't saying only a lease. I mean, I think when we put together the documents that go out on the street, the master lease would be an option. But we'd also see what else they wanted. I mean, we'll see what the numbers are, if somebody wanted to purchase it. All right. Madam City Attorney, did I see your hand up at one point?
It was just a little while ago when you all were discussing what kind of limitations
Sorry.
you could put on. But it's okay. Because it's a CRA property, I think you retain under the CRA statute the ability to put some parameters around what you want to see, so long as it's consistent with your CRA plan. But you were
Okay.
down that path anyway, so it's good.
Okay, brilliant minds. Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. I still believe that it's worth more than 7.5 million. I feel like the comps in Nora, although I think it's going to be an incredible location down the road, it's untested. Clematis Street is going to be our main street forever, and so I think that, I think we should let the market dictate. I don't believe that it's 7.5. I think we could still get 9.5. So I would really like to be able to circle back to some of these who tried to purchase it in the past, but I'm also afraid of turning into the boy who cried wolf, that we put it out a third time and we don't know if we want to have a lease or a sale. How are we going to decide based on if we get half the numbers are to sell and half the numbers come as a lease? What is the decision process going forward based on what we get?
Well, that's what we're here for, to make that decision. Is it an easy decision? No, but sometimes we have to make hard decisions in this business. Commissioner Beduzzi.
Brand Atlantic, we had a preliminary deal with them for 10.5. Has anyone gone back to them? And obviously the market has changed, but maybe they'd be willing to do it for 9.5. Maybe that $1 million would cover the additional interest rate, increase, or the cost of construction. Maybe there'd be some incentive, or we just put it out, and if they're still interested, I guess they can bid on it again.
I don't know, we got experts up here who we pay good money to tell us that it's only worth $7 million if we sell it. I think it's a little bit presumptuous of us to think that they don't believe that number. Commissioner Ward.
I'm sorry, I had to step out, so I missed it. So your rationale behind the master lease would be just so that we could get money kind of cover our costs, and then potentially maybe down the road when the market's better, get a better price for it? Or just kind of, hey, we want to hold on to the building and make sure that we know who's going to be operating there?
No, the rationale for suggesting a master lease is to see what the market wanted to do. There might be people out there who may not want to buy it, may not want to put out a chuck and change now, or they may want to lease it for a period of time, put some money into it, and they'll tell us. I just wanted to expand the possibilities. If there is a master lease, if somebody would rather do a master lease, take over the property, we're comfortable with the purpose they want to use it for, we're comfortable with what they want to do with an option to purchase, that's an interesting option to look at, as opposed to just limiting it to, let's just sell it, or, negotiate some kind of terms of a P3, which could all be on the table. I just wanted to make sure the master lease option was also on the table. I don't think that's anything we looked at before in our prior two iterations of this. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Maybe this discussion would come a little bit further down the road, but Ms. Rothenberg, or Mr. Roog, I don't know. Could you talk a little bit about the continuum line of P3 to disposing of the property and how much regulation or how much limitation can we put or suggestions on it? Because I would imagine if we just list it for sale, although you were saying we do have some rights to put limitations on it because it's in the CRA, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more detail about that.
Well, the statute indicates when the CRA sells property or property sold even by the city within the CRA district that we have the right to put the type of restrictions on that will make sure that the CRA plan that's been adopted is implemented in your transaction. So that's always there. When you talk about a P3, and what we're talking about here is something like an operation agreement, a lease agreement between a governmental entity and a private entity who's willing to engage in that transaction with you. Do you, by virtue of entering into agreements, you also retain a significant amount of control, assuming that you have a willing person on the other side who wants to meet whatever obligations you put forward. So I think that with a new notice of intent to dispose, putting both of those things out there, you'll cast a wider net and you'll be able to make a decision based on what you receive back.
And if I may, the spectrum of public-private partnerships or innovative project delivery, it really goes from just you have sale on one side, monetization, and the other side you have a design, build, finance, maintain, operate, where the city still owns the asset, but you have a private partner who does essentially everything else in agreement with the city. And then they may take on the revenue risk, where they're the ones generating revenue to pay for all that. Everything in between that is possible. I know for a fact in Florida you have the full legislative ability to do anything in there, but the caution is that every public policy that you add will cost the city money, not to be too blunt, but there is a cost associated with that. So you as the elected officials just have to decide on where on the spectrum do you want to land, the value of money, monetization versus the value of different things, different policies that you may want to implement in that property.
Follow up?
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So with that in mind, then knowing that there may be some restrictions, I'll just use, if we wanted to do somewhere on that spectrum of the P3, if we list it as your go-to market recommended pricing at 10 million, how do we list this saying, hey, we're open to having these discussions? Is it then, hey, they could come and offer something else and meet some of those demands, or they could offer the 10 and not meet some of those demands?
Please.
It depends. We're going to style the notice of intent to dispose based on the direction that's received today. And then you leave it broad enough so that you capture all of the folks who will be interested in the market to propose something based on what we've put out there. So you would include both of the options.
Okay. And because right now, based on this information, I am willing to negotiate a little bit on price to be able to get some of the things that we wanted. I just think that in the long term of the street, that's what we want to see here, and that when you walk down Clematis right now, this is a dead area that we would like to see, more active.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. Whatever that document is that goes out there, we should probably make it very clear as to the types of purposes that we either would look favorably upon or alternatively would not look favorably upon. So the marketplace is clear. In addition to the structure, whether it's a master lease, whether it's a purchase price, not to be less than X, whatever that number is, and the proposed purpose of the use of the property would be one of the desired purposes or would not be one of the undesired purposes, so that we're not limiting it. The more information we can include there, I think the better options or that we will receive. But we need to be very clear up front, as clear as we can be up front. I don't want to arbitrarily narrow the possibilities, but if there are certain things we don't want to see, if there's a certain price below which we don't want to sell it, or a certain price below which we don't want to do a master lease, we need to make that very clear. So we're getting responses in that we would favorably consider. Commissioner Ward.
I think, and align with Commissioner Fox's point, like, you know, we've done this now twice, and I think I'd be more in favor of putting the things that we don't want to see. That way we aren't limiting it all. My fear is that if we put, you know, if we go around the room today and say, these are the things that we want to see, what if there's something that we're missing out on and then we don't get those, and we're going around 4 on this versus, hey, we really, really don't want to see X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to give that just because in my mind, we can't do medical marijuana. So like, what don't we want to see? Because I don't want to be doing this for a 4th time. I'd rather limit it as, like, I honestly would rather not limit it at all. Just so we see as many bites as possible to see what we can do to finally dispose of this property or lease it out.
And if I may agree that you do, you want as many options, and I'll make a bad dad joke. You have apples and oranges. You're in Florida, so you're going to pick oranges. But what you don't want is a fruit salad of responses, and so you do have to have those parameters. If you just want to say, "Hey, who has good ideas?" You're going to get so many things that you're not going to be able to compare all of those. So you need to have some very thoughtful metrics.
All right. Chris, do you have enough direction, or do we need to narrow it or refine it?
So I've been taking notes, and so my thought is to draft some language, circulate it with board members to make sure that you all are comfortable with it, and then with a timeline. I would recommend, or my initial thought was to continue to have BDO as perhaps an advisor on this, both maybe on the language side, but then also perhaps looking at some of those proposals, because I suspect that when we do put it out, those will generate questions that we may need to answer. So try to bring as comprehensive of a presentation of options back to the board as possible with detailed information.
Okay, so you'll give us some language to look at before we formally prepare the document that goes out to the public.
Yes, Mayor.
So we can all look at that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's return now to item 1. I saw Mr. Forbes come in. There he is. Okay. So let's talk about Palm Trend Bus Shelter Improvements Program. Welcome, Mr. Forbes.
It's exciting.
Is there like an exotic facial hair requirement to work for your? You got a great beard, great mustache.
Thank you.
And that's a compliment, by the way.
I appreciate that.
Where is it? It's this one.
No, that's not it.
It's not it. Oh, wrong one. Give us a moment. Okay, well,
Great.
we have it.
Mr. Mayor, good morning, commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you just an update on Palm Trend and a project that's going to really have county-wide implications. All 39 municipalities would be involved. And actually, we've taken our show on the road. We've already met with all of the major municipalities in Palm Beach County, and we wanted to make sure that we left the biggest, baddest and brightest city for last.
That would be us.
And baddest using in the form of a superlative, of course.
All right, brothers, okay. Starting off real well.
So this is our agenda, just to give you an overview, provide an update on, the state of Palm Tran, and a project that will have countywide implications, our bus stop infrastructure. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for meeting with us early on this year, just to kind of coordinate our efforts. Just briefly here. Okay, this is, I don't know if you want to help me with this, because it's not in regular PowerPoint form. All right, there we go. And as always, we participate for the last several years in the Tri-Cities barbecue in the Glades region, where we have stuffed the bus. And so, we would love that your board comes out and supports us. Hundreds of toys are collected, and we take them down on our 40-foot diesel bus to the Glades region and bless many children during the holidays. Okay, system overview, just briefly. Our system serves, as you know, one of the largest geographical areas in the eastern United States. And that alone, creates a challenge for transit, right? When everybody wants their little piece of transit in their community, and we have such a large county, it's not the most efficient and effective transit system without the dollars. And so we have 3 modes at Palm Tran. Our fixed route is our main mode. That's our 40-foot bus, of which we have 150 of those. We have 31 fixed routes. We have our paratransit system, which provides door-to-door transportation for our elderly and disabled. And we have 300 of those vehicles. And a new service that I'm sure you would be interested in, and it's just taken off. It's has been really successful since we implemented it in 2018, and that's our mobility on demand mode. And that's been implemented in the Glades region. And that essentially is a door-to-door service, very similar to Uber and Lyft, that's actually operated by Palm Tran in the Glades region. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Palm Tran is not your grandfather's or grandmother's transit system. All right, it is, it's really state-of-the-art. We have a lot of folks from around the country to come look at what we're doing here at Palm Tran. As you can see in the top left is one of our buses assets that we use to do our business. That's one of our older models that we're phasing out. As you can see, it's a little unimaginative box sort of shape, and we've kind of switched to a more curved vehicle, diesel vehicle that I like to refer to as a smart bus. And so we've been purchasing these new vehicles, really, which I really think represent the South Florida community, Palm Beach County, and all it has to offer. Of course, you see our administrator, Virginia Baker, there on the lower left, and she's doing the Vanna White for one of our, what we call them the Baker doors now, but they're our operator doors, which helps with security, and it also mitigates, the spread of germs. And so we implemented those during COVID. Our buses have the state-of-the-art technology with these screens, these monitors. There are 2 monitors on every bus. It tells you real-time information, provides a public service information to the public. And a very great feature of this screen that has reduced the number of incidents on our buses is what is a security awareness feature. And so, when you're sitting on the bus, similar to when you walk into a convenience store or you walk into a Walmart, the camera points to you. And so it points to the customers that are in the bus and show them, just remind them that we're taking their picture. And that has had a real great effect with safety and security on our buses. And of course, we have implemented, and I don't think there's one transit agency that has implemented this fleet-wide, and that's our quantum automated wheelchair securement system. And so delivering a greater level of independence for our residents and visitors that have mobility issues. It used to be an operator had to assist a wheelchair or mobility device on our bus and secure it. Now that customer really gets their mobility device in position on the bus, press a button, and it automatically secures them. And again, we implemented this during COVID to really try to minimize the amount of contact between human and human. And it's just been a great project. Our customers love it. We implemented our state-of-the-art fare collection system. This is a real sophisticated state-of-the-art fare collection system, but I don't like to describe it because it's very complex. And so I've asked my marketing team, as well as myself, to describe it like this. If you're going to use PalmTran, approach the bus, and you will be able to pay your fare with anything on your person, be it cash, a credit card, a smart card, an iPhone, a wearable. Anything that you use to pay at a Starbucks or a store without cash, you can pay for it on our bus. And that's the type of system we designed and delivered. And it's just really taken off. And you will be amazed how conversant, because some of the criticism is, well, I don't know, the type of riders you have, I don't know if they'll be conversant with that type of technology. Man, please. They are,
technical term.
right. They love it. They love it. And the number of credit card uses with the open payment are just, they're flying through the roof. So something that we, provided to our customers to provide more convenience with using our system, as well as a return for us in really effectiveness and really keeping the bus moving. So folks aren't, dabbling with cash and change. Our mission to transition to zero emissions is off and rolling. Transit has been green before green was popular, right? Even with our diesel buses. And so this really takes us to the next level. We are transitioning from diesel to fully electric vehicles. We have selected a bus builder in Proterra off the state contract. And so we'll make sure you're invited to our first delivery, which we anticipate next year. Our goal is to convert 25% of our diesel fleet to zero emission by 2032. Of course, the Transportation Planning Agency, and I see some of your members here that serve on that authority, they have stockpiled about $12 million for PalmTran to purchase its initial buses. And that'll get us around 6 to 7 buses with the infrastructure. So we're starting that project, and we're very excited about it. And this is what I mentioned earlier in that mobility on demand that we implemented in the Glades region in 2018. Just a tremendous success with this service. And it's actually better than Uber and Lyft, because Uber and Lyft, as you know, is like a one-seat ride, right? And this service offers multi-rides, and so it's more efficient. And so the customers in the Glades, who are extremely conversant with the technology, hail the bus very similar to Uber and Lyft, using their phone. And we have 10,000 boardings a year. And I just pause just for a second, because this story is very impactful to me. I went to the Glades region before we were implementing this service, and we had all these community meetings. And I remember everybody was spaced out because it was during COVID. And I was in the auditorium, and I was standing up trying to kind of explain what type of service this will be. And I told the residents there, I said, this service would be like Uber and Lyft. And they looked at me with this stare. And this woman who stood up, a very distinguished black woman with gray hair, she stood up and she said, "Sir, we don't have Uber and Lyft in this community. In fact, we don't even have taxis." And I said, whoa. And I'm usually very good at knowing my community before I go speak to them. But it's a little self-deprecating, but that was a learning moment for me. Now, several years later, they refer to this service as their Uber and Lyft.
Nice.
Just to talk a little bit about the future, Our route performance maximization 2.0. We did 1.0 in 2018 where we really redesigned the entire bus network to be more direct, to more frequent. And so now we're entering RPM 2.0, which is a three-pronged approach. Implementing a project, first, last mile. That's the first prong. The second prong is implementing mobility on demand on the on the eastern part of the county. Where can we implement mobility on demand similar to the Glades? And of course, our enhanced transit 561 plan, looking at premium transit corridors in the next 10, 15, 20 years. What does our transit look like, from light rail potentially, from bus rapid transit? And so we're working closely with the TPA on that. But the Uber and Lyft, I like short term. and that's our short term project. When I say short term, I mean like now. I don't mean like 2-3 years to get down the road. When I tell my staff short term, that means now. And so this year, we will be introducing first and last mile as a pilot in 3 communities, not West Palm Beach, because you actually have some of the best transit service in all the county. So areas where there is not that great of transit service, how do we provide that connectivity, that first and last mile connection to our system? And we've identified 3 communities to do that, and we'll be doing that this year. For West Palm Beach, we will be implementing the Port St. Lucie Express. Not too many in our county administration, I really had to nudge our county administrator about this project because it's a difficult thing to think about. It's like, folks can't afford to live here. And so what do? Do we let them suffer? And so we have worked with the Florida Department of Transportation. A very good percentage of our residents, our employees, especially at Palm Tran, live in Port St. Lucie. And they take that trek every day. Mm-hmm. They pay taxes here. They work here. And so how can we ease that commute for them? And so we will be introducing the Port St. Lucie Express either winter or spring next year, depending on when we are able to get the buses delivered. But we're talking about direct one-way trips from Gatlin Boulevard, I-95, to downtown West Palm Beach at the intermodal. One-seat ride, 50 miles, and back. So it's a reverse commute. If you live in Palm Beach and work in Port St. Lucie, you can also do that reverse commute trip. And so fully funded by the Florida Department of Transportation, at least for 3 years. And we're excited, and we will partner with you on this as we begin to roll it out and introduce it. Transit services, just briefly, in Palm Beach County, again, in West Palm Beach, you have some of the more prolific service in the county because you're, of course, the most dense area in the county. And so we have 11 fixed routes. You have the intermodal center. Your high-frequency routes are Route 1 that goes from Boca Raton to Palm Beach Gardens and back. Route 31, which is at the intermodal, downtown West Palm Beach, goes to the VA, 20-minute service. Route 43, a route that's really booming, and we're looking at some enhancements to that route to actually build more ridership because frequency equals ridership. That route goes from downtown West Palm Beach on Okeechobee to Wellington, a very popular route. And airport service, we've been working with Assistant Administrator Fana on airport service where we're going to increase the frequency of airport service. So we're redesigning that. We were doing that in January. So we'll implement that in January. And of course, our intermodal center and what's going to happen there with that transit village project, TOD, Transit Oriented Development. We're the customers. We're excited about that. I understand that we do have a meeting set to talk more about that. So I'll let that meeting happen with the administrators and not talk too much about it. But we're excited about that transit village project. And this is our intermodal center. And we're going to have, this is the project we wanted to talk to you about. We just have a couple more minutes, Mayor, if you can indulge us. And that's our bus shelter program. We have over, 600 bus shelters throughout Palm Beach County. And the shelters are important, especially in Florida where we have inclement weather, to ensure that our customers are shielded. We don't have enough of them. And so we are going to replace and expand our existing shelters and expand our shelters throughout the county. And they'll be state-of-the-art. So, Yash, if you would like to take this part.
Absolutely. All
Good morning. My name is Yash Nagal. I'm the Director of Transit Planning at PalmTran. Really, the bus shelter part, as Mr. Forbes said, the street furniture is really important for us because that's the first interaction that anybody's going to have before they get into the bus. So what we've been doing is looking at the infrastructure that we have now and then finding ways, through the TPA, getting grants and going into actually a new solicitation, which allows us to put out transit infrastructure differently than we do today. Today, we use a lot of the advertising contracts where we get a split of the revenue and they sort of go out and put the infrastructure out there. We want to have more involvement in where the shelters go, where the structure goes, what kind of structure goes out. So that was really the idea behind going into a new solicitation. And you'll see different parts of the solicitation as we go forward in this presentation. Of course, you have a lot of service area. There's a lot of bus stops in West Palm Beach, it being the denser, one of the denser cities. There's a lot of shelters here too. We have Outfront Media, that's our contractor for the marketing services. They're the ones that sort of maintain the shelters here. We have a lot of bus stops that are maintained by us. We also have benches, which is a different advertising contract, but they're also doing the maintenance part inside the city, and similar to other cities in the county too. So similar to what we did with the bus, we're trying to go towards a modern, more sleeker design. On the left is what we have right now. You see the current shelter design. On the right is where we want to be. It's a more sleeker, modern-looking design that matches really our brand now. Of course, this is just a prototype of what we want. We haven't picked what we want yet, but we want to have enough flexibility for different municipalities to be able to brand. We know that you might want to have a different color or something that signifies something that's more important to you. You want to put that out as the city. So we left some room for the branding options. And really, this project is more than the shelters. We want to be able to buy everything that is associated with a good bus stop. So real-time screens, these are where you would be able to see the next arriving bus. If we want to put out any announcement, we can use these too. They're dynamic. We have a lot of semi-seats in West Palm Beach too. These are the smaller seats where they attach basically to the pole. So if you don't have a lot of right-of-way, at least you're able to put out a little bit of a seating arrangement for the passenger for their convenience. We also will have an option of a bigger screen at transit stations that have a lot more ridership. So similar to the smaller screen, we can possibly split the screen, push out more information. A good place for this would be the Intermodal Transit Center because it has 9 routes. So you'd want to push out more information out there. General features like bike racks that come with shelters. Solar lighting, this is a big one for us just because of safety reasons too, because at night we have a lot of bus stops that might be hidden. We want people to be able to see the bus stops, feel a little bit safer around them, and also for the operators, it's a lot easier if they can see the pole at night. If there's lighting, they know where to stop. And then finally, something which is fairly new to the industry. It's called the shaded seating. So it's similar to a semi-seat, but it has a little bit of a shade up top. So again, if you have limited right-of-way, these are things that you can put out for the customer. We're also redesigning the top blade part where we have our route numbers and everything. Through COVID, we've understood that people have gotten used to QR codes. What we want to do is have a QR code that you can basically scan, and it gives you all the information related to the bus stop, when your bus is coming, what routes are served by it, etc. So these are some of the simulations of what our final design might look like. And then before we started the project, one of the things that we did was we wanted to imagine what the future bus stop would look like. So we named this project the Bus Stop of the Future. So in this prototype, or in this rendering, you see newer trash cans, compactable trash cans, the solar lighting, the new shelter design. So everything that we could think of and everything that we want our future to look like. And with that, I will pass it back to Mr. Forbes.
So that concludes our presentation, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It's all about communication, collaboration, and cooperation. This is the team that will be working with your team, myself, Yash Nagal, who is our Director of Transit Planning, Crystal Ndano, and Deborah Posey-Blocker, our Leader in Governmental Affairs. So thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor. If you have any questions, we're available for you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to present to us. Let me first compliment you and commend you for the out-of-the-box thinking that your team is exhibiting, particularly with the Port St. Lucie Express. I think that's going to be a game changer because you're absolutely right. I mean, there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who work in our city who can't afford to live in our city. On that note, and I'm hoping that we can continue to have communication. We are in the fortunate position of having a number of workforce affordable housing projects coming out of the ground soon. And I'm hoping that there is at least, that you are aware of those projects so that there can be coordination, because as those projects, which will have some density involved and probably a number of people who either don't want to own a car or don't own a car, but will be looking to Palm Tran or some other means of ability to get back and forth to work. If there's coordination there, so we can make sure that either a stop is added or some conversation between the developer and Palm Tran. And so I'll leave it to my staff, maybe Ms. Johnson, if you could sign a staff member, as these projects start coming off online, to make sure that that conversation is happening between Palm Tran and the developer to see what can be done to make transportation convenient for those residents of those new projects. Commissioner Ward and then President Warren.
We will follow up. Thank you, Mayor.
And thank you for this. It is exciting, and I do want to, while you mentioned a lot, I want to just kind of focus on the bus shelters, because that's something that I've noticed for years up in the north, and we have a lot of riders along Broadway, US 1, and not a lot of bus shelters. And so I'm just curious on two things. One, what is the priority? Is it fixing the current shelters, or is it adding shelters before you go back and fix the shelters areas? Just because I'm thinking, like, as a mom, I'm not taking that with my daughter without a shelter with the heat and the rain. And so I just want to know the priority there. And two, what's the plan working with the municipalities, especially with our PD, and making sure that the people that are sitting there are using the bus system and not just sitting there to hang out all day?
Two very good questions that we've talked about in my organization. So the first is both are important, but our priority will be to install new shelters and expand shelters, replace shelters in high-frequency corridors in tandem. Okay. So we'll be adding 50 to 75 shelters annually. And we're looking at high-frequency corridors. So you'll see new shelters in your area quicker than a smaller municipality, because you have a high-frequency corridors. You have high-frequency corridors, Route 3, 2, 1, 31. So you'll see new shelters. And like, for example, on Military and Okeechobee, you see there, 4 shelters there. Those will be a priority to replace right away. So the community starts seeing right away, oh, they're doing something new and better for us. So that both are in priority, but of course, new shelters first. And your second question was?
How do you plan on working with municipalities, our PD, to make sure that the people that are sitting there are using the bus?
So, at Palm Tran, we worked a number of years to have a trespass ordinance for our shelters, our assets, and our facilities that we work with law enforcement. And so, you can be arrested if you are trespassing. That's easier said than done, right? We have a homeless issue, in Palm Beach County. And that's not the answer. The answer is helping these folks. And we've worked with the United Way. We've worked with the county's HOT team to do it, and try to house these individuals. Because what happens is, I know law enforcement, they don't like to arrest these folks. And you tell them to move, and where do they move? Right down to the next shelter. And so it's a larger issue that we are working with law enforcement on, our team, but it's challenging. Yeah.
President Warren.
Thank you. I'd like to echo the mayor's sentiment and the tremendous job that you and your team are doing.
Thank you.
You are really doing a fantastic job. And to be forward-thinking and approach this the way that you have is commendable. I'm sure that others are taking note of that. The the mobility on demand, I don't know if I missed, are there distance restrictions?
Very good question. Man, you guys are smart. So this service is far more expensive than the fixed route service. To provide door-to-door service is far more expensive, right? Because, you know, our service is about time, and the operator expense, the person driving the vehicle, is the most expensive part of our service. And so when it's circuitous, like Uber or a mobility on demand is not as effective. When it's linear, like the fixed route system is, it's far cheaper. So it's a very expensive service. So as we design these services, we have to scale them and really define the service area so that, you know, it has the type of parameters that won't get out of control in terms of expense. And so when you design a first last mile or a mobility on demand zone, it's typically, you know, around anywhere from 5 to 10 miles. That's whatever circumference that is, that's the zone. And it really doesn't go outside of that. And the ideal thing about the Glades region is it's zone in itself, right? It's like an island into itself. And so we don't go outside of the Glades region. You know, that service stays from, you know, Pahokee to South Bay and the Belglade in the middle. So that's why it's so effective. So service design and scaling the service area is critically important.
Yes.
Yes. And your ADA program, you know, with some increasing wages that have been allowed and requested, needed in the community for the very high cost of living that we have you reviewed the income requirements for the ADA participation?
Are you referring to the cost that the customer pays or the drivers?
Their income, the income maximums for the people that are qualified for the ADA program.
Oh, you're talking about a transportation disadvantage program.
Yes.
I believe we follow the state guideline of poverty level. So with that program, our monthly passes they're typically, you know, $70. Not typically, they are $70 a month to have unlimited transit. As a result of the transportation disadvantage program, they are able, based on way they sit in that guideline for, you know, poverty, they pay approximately $15 to $20 per pass. They also are able to access the paratransit service if we don't provide fixed route service, you know, in a particular area. For example, Loxahatchee, and you're transportation disadvantaged, we will actually send a smaller vehicle to give you door-to-door service. Now, that service is $3.50 a trip, but we have probably one of the more liberal transportation disadvantage and paratransit services in the country. Now, it's a worthy service, but it is growing at an unsustainable rate, where my desire is to be able to have it there when I need it 30 years from now, and a lot of other folks is going to need it. At the rate that we are growing, it won't be here. And so we'll be presenting to the board very, very soon about how we kind of rein in this very kind of liberal service so it's very worthy, but so that it's sustainable, you know, in the future. It's a very important service, but it's very costly.
And could you go back to that stuff the bus slide?
Oh, sure. I thought we recognized someone there.
I was just going to say, y'all see the all-star line up there on the stuff the bus?
Yeah,
That's all. That's it. Great job. Thank you.
James Green and your very own.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you so much. This is really great to see, and I'm grateful to see the expansion and the focus on new technology. I also had some questions, and I'm glad to see that the bus shelters are expanding and being modernized. whether it's technology on the bus, or I was really thinking about the shelters, thinking about, the broken window syndrome, and that, sometimes these shelters get defaced and vandalized. Can you talk a little bit about your maintenance plans for that? Because I know that with this new technology, it'd be great to make sure that we fix that and clean that up really quickly if in the unfortunate case it does happen.
So, fortunately, a lot of the technology pieces, they come with good warranty, so we're easily able to replace a lot of the technology parts. We will have a maintenance vendor who would go out and basically, change the broken glass, change the technology, whatever we would have to do.
And are we going to have glass, or what type of facing on the shelter are we going to have? We have options, so we have a sort of metal screen. It's translucent, sort of, so you won't just be blocked in by the back of the shelter. So there's some options we're exploring. I worked, in Miami-Dade County in the transit system there for a number of years, and we implemented, state-of-the-art shelters with glass backings. And it is kind of a challenge, but I was really surprised, out of 1,000 shelters throughout the entire community or more, that there wasn't as much vandalism. And if you have a good vendor, and we have to make sure we have a good vendor, we get those things replaced like the next day or within hours. If something happens, we get that vandalism, graffiti eradicated, and the glass restored quickly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baduzzi.
Just a quick follow-up to both Commissioner Lambert's and Commissioner Ward's questions regarding those shelters. And you had said that the county was either working on an ordinance, a trespass ordinance. Has that been implemented? Is there a trespass ordinance in place, and would our officers have the authority to enforce it?
Yes, the trespass ordinance is in place. I forgot from what year, but I think it was before I joined this beautiful community in 2015. So it is in place. We actually use it. Your officers, I think they're familiar with it. And it essentially gives our supervisors the right to call law enforcement, said that this is a problem customer, and the law enforcement officer is able, under that ordinance, to trespass that individual based on, whatever the violation is. It could be up to a year or indefinitely, depending on how serious it is. So they do use it. But it's something that we probably need to get out more to the municipalities, that is a tool that we use.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you so much. I am fortunate because I get to hear all these updates every month from you guys, and I'm excited about the zero emission plan and the Port St. Lucie Express. My question is, you talked a little bit about how you like to talk about the short term, but I wanted to ask you, I'm of the opinion that we need to invest more in public transit in order for more people to use it, instead of some, I think, thoughts looking at maybe there's not enough people using it, so we should scale back. And I've lived in cities where people have exclusively used public transit, and it comes every 5 minutes, it comes every 10 minutes, it's clean, it's efficient, and because it's so convenient, people take it more. And so I feel like we need more of an investment. And I'm wondering, Clinton, I know, we recently were in Austin together looking at their light rail and talking to them about how they got their expansion done, and I know that you were part of the team in Miami-Dade, maybe, that was working on that when it came to that county. I'm wondering if you could just talk to this board a little bit about, I know it would have to be something our county spearheads, but just a little bit about, the idea of how these other counties are putting more money into transit because they have either a surtax or a penny tax or something like that that helps fund it. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about that and how that might help expand PalmTran in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because it's really very important, especially for a beautiful place like what we live in, right? So we live in the South Florida community, which we call paradise, and you have Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Actually, the federal government and transportation recognizes us as the Miami urbanized area. So they don't look at us individually. They look at us together. And so you have Miami-Dade with a dedicated source of funding, which was one of the hallmarks of my career, to work in the mayor's office at that time, 20-something years ago, to get that project across the line. That's a half-cent surtax on goods and services, and it's in perpetuity. And so the amount of investment that they have in transit and transportation is just tremendous. And it's set up, and I'm glad to be a part of it, where that half cent, the municipalities get a 20% pro rata share of those dollars to implement. And of course, the larger municipalities get more money based on per capita, and they're able to implement shuttles, circulators, anything transportation related, curb cuts, sidewalks. And so that just has been a game changer for that community. Broward County implemented theirs in 2018. It's a full cent, and they're looking at light rail. They've added so much more service to that community. And as I talk to them almost on a weekly basis about their tax, they have one major problem. They can't spend the money fast enough, right? That's their issue. I mean, and so here in Palm Beach County is something that we have a conversation on, and it's about, it's what you leaders do all the time. It's about investing in your community. And that takes, sweat equity, but it also takes money, and it takes a lot of money. And so it would just be a tremendous game changer for this community to invest in direct democracy and pass something as monumental as a dedicated source of funding for transit and transportation. Because there's no secret here. People aren't going to stop moving here. They're not going to stop moving here. This is paradise. And I don't see many people moving away from here. And so, as that population builds at 1.5, I believe when I lived in Miami-Dade, it was 2 million. And we're 1.5 and growing. The time is now. And so you look at some of these long-term projects and you say, it's going to take 15 years to build a light rail. It's going to take almost 20 years and millions of dollars. How's that going to benefit me? And I always ask people, don't look at it selfishly. Look at your grandkids and look at their unborn and the investment that you're making in them. And that's why we're here. We're not just here for ourselves in the now, even though I talked about now and I love it. We're here to protect and ensure that our kids and their kids have a vibrant and viable future in this community. And if we don't make that investment now and we keep kicking that can down the road, we'll be stuck. And when I mean stuck, gridlock. Okay, so it's important. Look, you have to have an array of transportation options. Our system right now is not the system that you can use. It's not a system that I can use. I force me and my team to use the system on a quarterly basis, or at least a quarterly basis, because I have meeting to meeting. I can't jump on transit and go to a meeting. You can't jump on transit and go to a meeting. So we need a system that's more frequent, that you can jump on a light rail and get to a meeting. And that system is going to take 20 years. But that's the investment we should be thinking about today. And so thank you for the opportunity to just talk a little bit about that.
All right, any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you again, Mr. Forbes and your team for coming to visit us. Don't be strangers. We want to continue to hear more about all the exciting things that are happening, and so that we can continue to work together.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioner. Thank you for your time.
By the way, is the Baker Doors, is that an official title? Should I send her a congratulatory note that she's got bus doors named after her?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you. Okay, item 3, First Stamps Grant Program update. Mr. Hayden and Ms. Hammerstein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Figured this out. My staff normally doesn't allow me near these things.
You know what they say about old people and technology, don't you?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I truly do.
Wait, what did they say?
I was listening to your comments about the beards with that other group that was here. Mine used to look like that a few years ago, sir, but Mother Nature has taken its toll. Mr. Mayor, Madam President, Commissioners, Ms. Johnson, my name is Frank Hayden. I'm the Director of the Office of Small, Minority, and Women-Owned Business as our previous people say, in this fine city of West Palm Beach. And I'm so proud that I have the ability to service here. You all might remember that we met several months ago, and I talked to you about this program that we wanted to initiate. You gave us some good feedback in terms of improvements that we needed to make the program better. And we took those into account. And I think as we go through this presentation, you'll find that we exceeded all that we thought. This is the categories that we were going to make available to our community. We began this program on April 7th. We had a kickout over in the commission chambers. The room was packed. You would think we're giving away money, but I guess in reality we were doing that service. And the cutoff for that was April 28th. I'm not going to go through this list, but this is the basics, the categories that anyone who wanted to get part of our money here had to meet. Part of the most important piece was that you had to be certified with the City of West Palm Beach as a small or minority-owned business. Your business had to be located in the City of West Palm Beach as well. You couldn't owe the city or the CRA or anyone else any debt because we took that into it. Your business had to be a for-profit organization. You must be registered with the State of Florida Division of Corporation, and the business must submit a W-9 with its grant application. Those were the basics. You had to meet that criteria for us to even consider your grant application. The important part also, you had to make sure you were inside the City of West Palm Beach's boundaries. And so we provided a map. We asked them to go and look to ensure the fact that they were in the boundaries of the City of West Palm Beach. We also ensured that the businesses met the eligibility criteria listed below. And those are the things that I talked to you about a few minutes ago. And we indicated to them that they would complete these applications and send that information in to Sandy Hammerstein in order for us to then review and make our decisions. This is the grant application, and once again, I'm not going to go through the whole piece with you. At the end of my presentation, we'll provide you with this presentation, and so you'll have all that information to look at. This is the most interesting part that I think. We were in receipt, once the date closed to submit, we were in receipt of 200 plus applications. And when we counted up the requests, it came to $9.4 million. Now, y'all only gave me $500,000, so that presented a problem all into itself. But as I shared with the mayor and with Ms. Johnson, what it told us was there's a need out there in our community among our business individuals. And the other thing I'd like to say to you, this commission, this city, since the COVID, in fact, has invested, including this last investment of $500,000, you've invested over $1 million in the businesses in the City of West Palm Beach.
Say that one more time.
Yes, sir. This city, under the fine leadership of our mayor,
You didn't say all that.
no, I'm sorry, has invested over $1 million in its businesses. The first was $350 that you did right after COVID. Then you did $150, and now we've invested this other $500,000. There is no other city in South Florida which has made that kind of commitment to the businesses that are in their cities. But we, looking through all those 200+ applications, we could not do that on our own. And so we asked for help from individuals, businesses here. We had Ms. Veronica Cooper, who is the Vice President of Cooper Construction and Management. We asked Mr. Bruce Lewis of LB Limited, and Thea Sullivan, who is with Valley National. In each one of them, we asked that they take a look at those areas where their expertise was found. Bruce, we asked to take a look at the marketing aspects. Ms. Cooper, we asked her to take a look at the equipment, that aspect of the grants, and each one of them filled out their application and take a look at the application and provided us with feedback of their opinions of each one of those. And quite naturally, I couldn't have done any of this without my fine staff that I've been blessed with to help me look as good as I do when I'm out here talking to you. I talked to you before. There were 236 applications we received. Of those, the Jumpstart Academy, as you were, the mayor's initial Jumpstart Academy, there were 11. We received 72, which were not in the city. We found 4 that had a debt to the city, 22 with code violations, non-certified was 73. The finalists broke down to about 61 after we eliminated those others. We rejected 21 of those, and those rejections were of as small things as, help me, Sandy, my memory has gone bad real quick.
No marketing plan?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, real.
Say that into the court.
They didn't include the marketing plan in their application or? Oh, for the record, my name is Sandy Hammerstein. I work with Mr. Hayden. Thank you.
So those were just kind of the minimum kind of things that we took a look at. It just amazes me that you ask for marketing money, but you give no marketing plan. But those were the ones we eliminated. And so our final recommendation is down to 40 firms. And as you can see down here, I think I did a good job, Ms. Johnson, that we didn't spend all the money. So we're roughly at about 484,000 and some change. But I will tell you this, we continuously go back and review those applications that we've rejected or decided not to fund to make sure we didn't miss anything. And so this number might jump to 41. It might jump to 42 in terms of making sure that we're taking care of as many people as we can. And I will say to this, it was a very difficult decision because, as you could see, there were a number of people who have made requests for assistance. But I made a decision that I was going to attempt to help as many businesses in this city as I possibly could. We could have made it real simple because for property and inventory, it was, you could apply for $50,000. So I could have given out 10 of those and we'd have helped 10 firms and that would have used up every penny that we had. But we've spread that money around, and I think we're going to impact more firms than what we initially thought we were going to be able to. And part of the way that we did that is, just an example, a company would ask, for example, 6 laptops. We'd give them 3. So that we'd have some extra money then to provide to the others who were participating in this program. This is a breakdown of where we have are recommending that those dollars be spent. 21 in the equipment inventory, 7 in marketing, 8 in new businesses, and 4 in property improvement, and that comes up to the total that we had of $484,000. We will continue to notify those that did not meet the minimum requirement. We have sent out notices already to those who were not certified by the city or who owed money to the city, which made them disqualified in participating in our thing. So I want to thank my staff. I want to thank those business folks that we asked to assist us, to help us come to this decision. And then finally, I want to thank all of those businesses out there who applied for the services that, the funding that we were going to make available. And I think in the end, we are able to help more and more of our small minority businesses in this city by trying to spread this money that we had to as many as we possibly could. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will entertain any questions that you all have for me.
Thank you. Let me go way back and thank Administrator Johnson when we were putting the budget together for this year, finding $500,000 to put into the general fund for this purpose. And so I want to start there. But Mr. Hayden, I want to thank you and your staff for Yeoman's effort to implement what I think is a fair program. You met with us. You told us what the criteria would be. We heard from this body. You tweaked it. You incorporated suggested changes, and then you went out on the street. And I happened to be there when we had the initial rollout in April, and the room was packed. So we know the need exists, and I'm proud to say that we as a city, commissioners have led the way in terms of investing in businesses, in small businesses in our city, and that is something we all can be proud of. There's more work to be done, obviously. And there's an old saying that no good deed goes unpunished. So when you're out there, you've announced that you want to have these grants and give them away, inevitably there will be people who don't get them and who are disappointed, and we have begun to hear from those. I also want to commend you for the process that you use to narrow it down. You selected what I think is a very, it was a blue ribbon panel, a committee to help you and your staff to winnow through the applications. And I also applaud you for the attitude that you brought. Let's try to get as much money as possible to as many businesses as possible. As you said, it would have been very easy to fund the max, and we would have been out, and there have been just a few businesses that benefited. But I like your analogy that you used. Somebody wanted 6 laptops. You said, no, we'll give you 3, so that we could spread the monies around to as many businesses as possible. So all in all, I think you and your staff should be commended for doing the best that you could with the monies that were allocated. Again, Ms. Johnson, thank you for making sure $500,000 got into the budget so that we could do this process. Is it perfect? No. But did you do the best that you could with what you had? I strongly believe that. So thank you for that. Questions? Commissioner, President Warren, and then Commissioner Ward.
I would also like to say I think that you did an amazing job. I think you made it look easy. You brought a tremendous amount of expertise to the process, and you worked hard. I think that the message was clear from the beginning, and that we allowed everyone to know what the criteria was and what the qualifications would be, versus them getting into the process and not knowing. So thank you for your clear communication and the way that you brought this forward. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues and your willingness to do something different and to just make sure that we are as accessible and as understanding to the small business community as I believe that we've been, because we recognize that the small business community is really vital to our community as a whole. So supporting those businesses is important to us as a city. When I look at the period that the application was open, and I'm hopeful, let me preface this by saying I am hopeful that we'll be able to duplicate this and that we'll be more, that we'll find additional funds because the need was great. And I think that it was a lesson for us that that it was needed.
Let's see, you done poked the bear.
I'm hopeful. I'm so hopeful because that's going to be my last question: is when we do it again, would we be able to look at a broader range of opportunity? Because the window from April 7th to April 28th, and people then seeing what the criteria was, that there may have been things that they could have done differently had they had more time to get their affairs in order and reach the fulfill the requirements for the grant application. So hopefully, as we move forward, that'll be something that we can consider.
Ms. Johnson.
But great job, amazing job.
When we started down this path sometime back, we had a opportunity to either use some federal funding to make this happen, but in our opinion, it had too many restrictions on it. And so I was happy that the city under Ms. Johnson's leadership tapped in and made some funds available. Now, in answer to your questions, I think we can look at what's out there, grants or something like that, that might provide us with some additional funding that we can help more businesses in the city than what we were able to help at this time. And then the other thing that we found, and I talked to the mayor about this early on, we've discovered that there's a number of our businesses which need extra help. And we're going to be putting in place some programs to make that possible so that we begin to strengthen them. Because as you know, we've put in place programs to teach them how to do marketing. We've put in how to build your business so you can get bonding and all those sort of things. And so we're going to continue to provide those kinds of services to the community so that they can become stronger and work out. And then just lastly, and then I will stop. You might remember early on, we had a relationship with a number of banks here in the city that we said that if businesses had a contract with the city to do some work, they could go to those banks and get some upfront capital to help them survive. So we are doing everything we can in this city to help our businesses be more successful. But Ms. Johnson has made it clear, we're not tapping into the funds anymore here with the city to make that happen.
And if you want to hear from Ms. Johnson directly on that, I'm sure she will reiterate that. Commissioner Ward, I think you.
Yes, thank you. And I agree, this is phenomenal, and it's nice to see that you guys are thinking about kind of that wraparound services of, hey, if we can't give you money, then let's just focus on there. And so I had two questions. One is that, like when you're talking about property and changing that, we've got other organizations like the CRA and DDA that provide facade grants. So are you kind of, was that part of the process where you're like, hey, we can only do this much, but then let's introduce you to this organization that has a different grant or a different purpose that you're working with?
Answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
We have pointed them in those directions to make those things happen. Now, the other side I should tell you is if they were getting money from the CRA, they were not getting money from us.
Okay, okay.
You can't be dipping in both the city's pots. But
All right.
in answer to your question, yes, ma'am. If we can only take you so far, then we can point out to you some other avenues you can take to help you get to the next level.
Okay, and I have a second question. You gave us that 9.4 million, but after you got rid of the people that are out of the city limits, do you guys have that total amount of the people that were within this city that they were requesting? Dollar amount?
No, I don't have that, but I'm pretty sure if we went back through the 200 and some, we could come up with a number of those within the city. And I would guess the majority of the folks that we ended up with, most of them, I think, would be in the city, but they didn't do something else, didn't provide us with the proper paperwork and documentation to be awarded the money. But that's an interesting, we can go back and find out what that actual number of the ones in the city who applied for our information. We'll provide that to your commission as well. Yeah.
Commissioner Lambert, then Commissioner Fox.
Thank you so much. Great job. I echo the comments that have already been made. It's exciting to see this and look forward to hearing more about the businesses that we'll be working with. Have you already notified the businesses? So my question, I have two questions. My first question relates to, it's about 15,000 delta between the amount that you propose we fund and the $500,000. Are there plans for that 15,000, or is there plans to go back? And if we said we're only giving you 3 laptops versus 6, that maybe then we could fund a little bit more of their request?
I'm not going to go backwards, only because once I open that up, I'm going to be in. But what we will do, as I said earlier, we continuously go through to ensure that we caught everything. And I'm confident that, because we are human, as we go back, that difference between the 500 and the 488 where we are, that's going to be spent as well for those businesses that we're able to help. Now, a lot of them, most of them will probably not get anything what they thought they wanted, but they will get something. We intend to take advantage of every one of those dollars that we have available.
Great, thank you. And second question, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. I thought it was really interesting. I'm grateful that you said the folks, who don't have marketing plans, that we have a program in place to help people with that. But 72 applicants didn't even live in the city, and that was a clear requirement. Just curiosity, I'm curious if you have a thought or about why they were applying. Was it that they didn't look at the requirements, that they were in unincorporated county, or
some of them were in the county and they confused us with a county grant? So they were from Boca, North Palm Beach, Belgrade, other places. There was even one North Florida. I don't know if they just saw us in the in the website and they thought, oh, let me just fill this out. So we had a lot of people that were confused, I guess.
I remember, and I'm sorry, Mr. John.
No, go ahead.
I remember at the kickoff event, there was a gentleman there who was from Lake Worth, and he wanted to know whether or not that was in the West Palm Beach boundaries or not, and then requested that we waive that requirement so that he could get access as well. So I think most people were driven by the thought of being able to get some funding, and in hopes that we'd miss something or we wouldn't catch it or something like that. And what I've said to folks on a regular basis, if you're really interested, then you ought to move into my city. I'll be more than happy to help you and take care of you.
Yeah, if I could just add a couple of footnotes to that. Of those 72 who didn't qualify because they lived outside of the corporate limits, I got a couple of calls from them asking to waive the requirement that the business be within the city. And, of course, that's not something that we could consider. I actually got a demand for a meeting, to explain why it had to benefit West Palm Beach. Why wouldn't the city open it up? And I think Mr. Hayden hit the nail on the head, that they were driven by the fact that this is a rare opportunity where you're getting free grant dollars that don't come with all of the federal or state restrictions. It's general fund money, so the city had the ability to design a very flexible program, and certainly I want to recognize the job that Mr. Hayden and his staff has done in doing that. But yeah, and so most of the complaints that I have heard, have been from people that could not participate because they don't do business here within our city.
Interesting. Thank you.
There is a takeaway. I think it should be for the county and other municipalities to see if they could do something similar for the small businesses in their jurisdiction, because the need is there.
Yes.
So if I was one of those small businesses residing outside of the city of West Palm, I didn't want to move to West Palm, then I'd be knocking on the door, whether it's the county commissioner or city commissioner, mayors in those jurisdictions where I am, and said, listen, West Palm Beach did it. Why can't you? Commissioner Fox, did you have your hand up? And Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you so much, and thank you for all you did to communicate this. I saw you out in the community. Obviously, that room in the photo you were showing was packed. My question is, did you get a lot of applications, new applications to be certified with the city from this process? And if so, how many was that?
Well, I don't know if I can tell you off the top of my head what that number is, but let me do it this way. Prior to my starting that, I had 350 certified firms. Today, I have close to 700.
How many?
700.
Great.
It's about 650. Now, understand, and my staff tells me to say this all the time, because we have two programs. We have the MBE and we have the SBE. Some of them are double, but I still like the number of 650. So, Commissioner Fox, yes, we have increased that number. And I will tell you this, too, because part of the complaint we have gotten, and this question came up when we had the kickoff, that someone asked, what are you going to do to ensure that we get certified in time? And I've responded to them, we can only do our best in terms of making that happen. But I then have also said to them, we've been certifying firms in this city for a number of years. So if you're really interested in being certified, you would have taken care of that. The only reason you're interested in it now is because I have some money. So when I was broke, you didn't like me. But anyway, so yes, the number of certifications have increased. I think it will continue because of the kind of leadership that we have here in the city and the dedication to helping out small businesses and minority and women-owned firms as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you. I just would like to echo the comments made by my colleagues, and thank you for your diligent efforts to make sure that those funds were put to the best use possible and help as many businesses as possible. I'd also like to thank our city administrator for always watching our city funds, and I actually appreciate your reaction that you're like, no more funds. In a meeting, I had referred to her as a penny pincher, and she said it was the best compliment I ever could have given her.
President Warren.
Do we know when the funds may be distributed?
Yes, now that I have shared this with you all, and as you know, there was didn't attach any company names or dollar amounts that are going out to them. We will begin the process of notifying those firms. We'll do a press release. We'll talk about who was successful. I don't know, and I have to make sure our legal folks, I don't know if I'm going to identify how much each person got in the press release, just the amount that we were able to make. But each person will get a notification. They have to then sign the grant agreement, provide that back. That also tells us what exactly they're doing with the amount of money that we're providing to them and so forth. And so that process, Sandy would like for it to be over because she used to have more hair than that earlier. But I think we'll be able to start that process sometime this week. And then once we get all the proper paperwork back, then the funds can begin to be distributed to those successful individuals.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Fantastic. Congratulations again, Mr. Hayden, to you and your team. Job well done, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, item 4, fiscal year 22 fund balance update. Ms. Souffrant and Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Bridget Souffrant, Chief Financial Officer. I am here this morning to speak with you and provide an update on the fiscal year 2022 general fund balance. We are going to also discuss the fund balance by category as it relates to GASB number 54, which is the accounting standards that we have to report it by. So to start off, your fund balance is the difference between your assets and liabilities, which essentially means it's the money you have left over at the end of the year. GASB 54 classifies all of our fund balance dollars in 5 categories: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. The first category is your non-spendable. These are the assets that are not considered in spendable form. They are things such as inventory or prepaids that you cannot quickly convert into cash by design. Next is restricted. Restricted fund balance are funds that are restricted due to another entity that has enforceable legal restrictions on these dollars. You typically see this with your federal or state funds, as well as grants or funds that we may owe another entity by an agreement. The third category is committed. Committed funds have constraints, but these constraints are placed on those funds by the local municipality at the highest level of authority. So for us, that's the commission ordinance or resolutions. The fourth category is assigned, which calls out funds that have an intended use, which have been stated formally by the commission or an authorized official. The fifth and final category is the unassigned fund balance. These are funds that are available for any purpose. The city, per ordinance, is required to maintain an emergency reserve of 10% of our operating revenues. This emergency reserve can be used only for emergencies as declared by the commission. For fiscal year 2022, that emergency reserve is $19,411,889. Additionally, the city requires a minimum fund balance reserve equal to 3% of the operating revenues. This is keeping in best practice with industry standards. For fiscal year 22, that number is $5,823,567. Now that you are well versed in the different types of fund balance categories, let's look at the general fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2022. So the column to your far right is the bolded totals by category, and the column to your left just breaks out the different items that come into play. So for non-spendable, our total of prepaids and inventories was $697,213. We did not have any restricted dollars in fiscal year 22, so you don't see that on the list. Moving to committed, that is where we hold that 10% in emergency reserves, as well as the reserves for art and public places, totaling $22.4 million. Then we look at our assigned, which is the rolled over purchase orders from prior years that we still have to account for. That is $4.4 million. And we get to the unassigned portion of the fund balance at $36.6 million. And we'll dive in on the next slide, or the next few slides more in detail. So the total fund balance as of September 30th, 2022 was $64,257,794. Again, this is general fund only. So going back to that $36.6 million number under the unassigned fund balance, we subtract out the 3% reserve for the minimum fund balance that we talked about. We subtract out our real estate and landscape management funds that we hold in the general fund. Then we take out any of our cash carry forwards or obligations that are still open from fiscal year 22. We also have to account for every appropriation during the calendar year of fiscal year 23 until we stand here today in front of you that was taken via F resolution to get to our estimated discretionary spending, which is $19,441,398 for fiscal year 22. This slide further illustrates the best practices and emergency reserve and minimum fund balance reserves that the city has on hand, and that it's increased over the years, with it being at $25.2 million combined for 2022. In summary, at the end of fiscal year 2022, again, we have $19.4 million in the required emergency reserve funds on hand, $5.8 million on hand for our minimum unassigned fund balance, leaving us with 19.44. These numbers are really similar. So 19.44 in estimated funds for discretionary spending. I threw a lot of numbers at you very quickly. Do you have any questions on my portion of the presentation?
Any questions, President Warren?
Non-spendable, what are inventories?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Inventories, can you tell me what that is?
When we talk about fuel, there's accounting practices for inventory. Streetlight poles, any type of materials that might be in the warehouse are still inventories that are on hand. So those are still items that we have to account for on the back end.
Any other questions for Ms. Affront before we hear from Ms. Johnson? Okay, thank you, Ms. Affront. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Faye Johnson, City Administrator, and before I start, I just want to make a footnote to the discussion about finding additional money for continuation of the program that Mr. Hayden mentioned. You know, and while I'm always very, very judicious about our funds and our budget, I don't want it to be lost on the commission that certainly you all are the policymakers, and as you all set priorities, my job as the city administrator is to balance those competing priorities and make every concerted effort as to how they can all be addressed. What I try to do is temper expectations so that we don't get ourselves in a situation that we're committing dollars before I'm able to count them. So with that, I'm going to start with the presentation on the one-time funding proposal. Commissioners and Mayor, you all should have gotten a breakdown with more details than what is actually listed in the presentation on the items. Just to put it into context, back in April of this year, I presented part one of the one-time funding plan that the board supported, and that was about $5.3 million that the board supported, and most of that has been brought to the board by way of F resolutions. And I indicated at that time we would be looking at a part two of the plan, so that is what is being presented before you this morning. And with that, I'm going to delve in. So Ms. Souffrant walked you through the fund balance from FY22. In that, she indicated the discretionary funding that is available is approximately the $19,441,398. The board will recognize the next number in that it was approved just at the last board meeting We got a right-of-way payment that was approved from Palm Beach Atlantic University of 2.677 million, rounded 2.7 million that is going to be coming to the city. And then we have, as part of this presentation, 2.9 million from American Rescue funds. To put that 2.9 million into context, back in August of last year of 2022, we did a presentation on the city's second tranche of rescue funding, and all of those dollars were allocated to different categories. There was 2.9 million that the board approved under public health and economic response. And the intent was to take about 1.9 million and find additional projects that met the eligibility. So it had to be in certain census tracts, and we were looking at trying to find roadway or sidewalk projects that we could identify. Another million was allocated to assist nonprofits into providing different type of services that they could demonstrate that the loss of that service was connected to COVID. And so we've not been able to identify eligible projects that met that criteria. Just with the point that was made about why we switched the funding for Mr. Hayden's program from rescue dollars to general fund is because there are just very, very stringent requirements that must be met. So given that we have not been able to find eligible projects for the 2.9 million and the requirement for rescue dollars to be committed by December 31st of 2024 and then expended by December 31st of 2026. I've included that remaining 2.9 million, which we are yet to find identified projects, as part of what is being presented this morning. So long story short, this plan is based on the availability of $25,018,898 of available discretionary funds. As part of the plan, it includes a proposal to allocate $19,906,522, which, if supported, would leave a remaining balance of the $5.1 million plus that is on the screen. The wrong direction, pardon me. So what does the plan entail? The first item that is proposed is $3.7 million toward the vehicle replacement plan. As the board is aware, last year at this time when we put the FY23 budget together, we started on this path of a best practice to include funding to replace our vehicles on an annual basis. The 5-year plan was premised on approximately $8 million of funding every year to keep the replacement of vehicles on track. In the tentative budget that was presented in work session, we have $4.3 million of general funds dialed into that budget that will come to the board for adoption in September. So looking at the $8 million that the plan is premised on, we have a $3.7 million gap. Therein the recommendation to include that in the plan. Moving on, right now we have 2 parks bond projects that have come in over the budget, one significantly over budget. The 2 projects consist of the Howard Park Tennis Center. About $644,280 is needed to close the gap between what was budgeted and what the bid came in at. And then when we look at the Gaines Park Tennis Center and Community Center, 2 different projects that were bid as one. That bid for that comprehensive project came in at $5,591,191 over the $9 million budget. We don't have the ability to segregate the two projects because we bid them as one. And if we were to do that, we would have to go back out, and I think we run the risk that we're going to get an even higher number because construction is continuing to increase as opposed to reach that plateau where it's flattening out. So we're recommending that the board close that gap by utilizing the $2.9 million of rescue dollars, given that we have already plugged rescue funding into the Gaines Park project. Take the balance of what's left allocated to this project, and then the remaining gap of about $2.7 million will come from general fund discretionary dollars. We do have a PowerPoint teed up just on these two projects, should the board need to walk through those at the end of this presentation. The next item proposed in the plan is $1 million for the Henrietta Avenue Affordable Housing Development. As the board will recall, we supported a partnership with the West Palm Beach Housing Authority to redevelop that property, about 1.5 acres right there at the intersection of Henrietta and 15th Street. It has a gap of about $1 million, and we would like to see that project fully funded so that it can get moving. The next item, and I want to just preface these next items, Mayor and Commissioners, really are renovation maintenance items that typically you would see funded in your annual budget. Our practice in the past has been that we do not or have not included operating dollars for maintenance, for repairs, and building renovations. It is a best practice to include that in your operating budget, but we're not there yet. That is one of the priorities that I am looking at, getting us to a budgeting best practice where items like maintenance, repairs of equipment, building repairs become part of the operating budget. Until we get to that point, and I think we may be just a budget year away from getting there, we have to continue to practice of funding those kinds of things from one-time dollars. So from that perspective, when we look at the $800,000 proposed for parks, trails, and field renovations, it consists of the Drill Park South Trail, which is in disrepair in a number of the areas. So a portion of that, about $275,000, would go toward repairing the South Trail. And then for Bill Moss Park, the fields are in such condition that they are really not usable for athletic programs. So we really would like to see the fields rebuilt up to professional standards. Moving on, again, a maintenance issue that we have here with keeping up the maintenance on our mediums, traffic calming within the right-of-ways, and we have several different areas under this broad category. From a medium standpoint, the money would be focused on Saratoga, Village Boulevard, and Brandywine. We used to have an agreement with the Homeowners Association where they maintain most of the mediums in that area. Here recently, we were not able to continue that, so it now becomes the city responsibility, and we think that given the importance of that spine within our city and the adjacent streets, that we need to focus on making certain that the mediums are maintained. This also includes maintaining the landscape here at City Center. I mean, this is, you know, the bread and butter of where we conduct city business, and certainly it should be kept up to certain standards. When we look at the right-of-ways, we actually have a variety of different types of bullets that we have installed within the right-of-ways. They get damaged from time to time on a regular basis, and we need to be able to make the repairs that are needed. When it comes to the traffic calming devices, we have them throughout the city, and just in the natural course, of transporting people back and forth, cars and all, invariably we have damage to them. The wear and tear on them from, high traffic volumes of cars. We need to maintain pressure cleaning on our traffic calming devices. So a good portion of that $525,000 will go toward that, the lion's share of it, of about $300,000. Moving right along to another area of maintenance and repair has to do with our HVAC, our air conditioning systems and roof replacements. And that's in a number of areas because, again, budgeting sins of the past, we have not kept up with the maintenance, of different systems here within the city. And we've been doing patchwork and trying to put Band-Aids on it. We have a number of systems that have reached their end of life, and we just got to invest the money into bringing them up to a better standard. So if I were to move on, again, this particular area here at the city complex, we have just very unacceptable sanitary situations there that need to be rectified immediately. And so we have to put some money into the restrooms there at the complex. The complex itself needs a big shot in the arm in terms of upgrades. We are looking at having a consultant work with the staff to look at the complex as a whole and to give us a plan of what needs to be done there so that we can have a dollar amount of what that will cost and then put together a phased-in funding plan for that. Over at the complex, that's where we have, we do all of the work on the cars, the fleet. The canopy over there is in a state of disrepair. So we're looking at refurbishing it. And then part of the $866,000, a small portion of that will go toward the design work to help us get a handle on what it would look like. The next category of funding is public safety equipment replacement. Some of the items, for example, in fire, a need to purchase decontamination washers so that when the firefighters go out on assignment, they would be able to come back and wash their protective gear in the washers as opposed to what is currently being done, and that is manually. And we think that having these decontamination washers certainly should help with reducing the exposure to carcinogens so that it limits our exposure to the risk of cancer here with our firefighters. We certainly need to lessen that exposure. In the police department, there are a number of items that are in need. They are articulated in the narrative. The drone that the police department has right now is no longer considered the standard for government use. It needs to be replaced. They utilize a less lethal launcher, and that item also needs to be purchased to add to the inventory. When we talk about the ballistic rifle shields additions, this will provide more body coverage to our officers in the course of doing business. The crime scene investigation unit, or as they refer to it, CSI, in terms of their laboratory, where they do a number of testing and other things, is no longer operational. So these are just day-to-day types of equipment that they need in the course of doing their business to protect the public, that simply needs to be replaced or purchased. The gun range, the air conditioning or air handling system there needs to be improved so that the proper circulation and air quality is there. Another item for police is to begin a replacement plan of the laptops. Their total inventory is about 350 laptops. If the board were to support the plan, the first phase would be replacing 88 laptops within police. Looking at the out years of the plan, I've had discussions with Mr. Jones, our Chief Information Officer, about rolling police's laptops into the city's laptop replacement plan and not treating it as a standalone so that we can plan for it as part of the overall organization laptop replacement plan. So we're hoping to do that for year 2 of the plan. The next category is office furniture and carpet replacement. As part of the Phase 1 plan, we indicated that we were going to hold off on bringing forward replacement of the carpet because we were still in the midst of getting City Hall ceiling project completed. You know, we had a false start there, but it's now back on schedule. So we're looking to now plan to have the carpet replaced within certain areas of City Hall. Because the building had major leaks, we had carpet damage. I know we had carpet damage in the commission office due to a flooding issue there, so we want to complete the replacement of the rest of the carpet in the commission office. Over at the Mendel Public Library, very high traffic use area. That carpet needs to be replaced. We're going to start in the high traffic areas of the library, replace that, and then phase in the replacement of the rest of the carpet in future budget years. And then the last item that is presented for the board's consideration is to start a building fund in anticipation that we have a number of significant repairs and upgrades that are needed at the complex, which I've already articulated, and then here at City Center. We need to start planning for these repairs as opposed to allowing them to just go for so long, and then we're behind the 8 ball with trying to get repairs and upgrades done, or even tougher, trying to find the money to be able to cover it. So this would be the first step toward a building fund that will help us plan and then have funding to actually make the repairs. So with that, I'll open it up, Mayor, for questions and discussion from you and the board.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, I want you to remind us, and this is going back to the vehicle replacement allocation, remind us what we were doing about vehicle replacements before you recommended to us we start setting money aside. How do we handle replacing vehicles?
Well, for the most part, what we were doing was keeping vehicles extremely past the useful life. And we were incurring quite a bit of costs with repairs, trying to keep them on the road. From the funding standpoint, when we got to that place where vehicles just were not operational, we would then try to find money. So we were looking at whatever pocket of money we could find. Typically, we would look at one-time funding. There have been instances when you look back at our history where we've had to go into that 3% funding that is prescribed by code to be able to fund vehicles. So we just looked, as that critical point where the vehicles could not be repaired to find it. So we really did not have a plan for how we were managing our vehicles.
And these vehicles included police and fire, am I correct?
Absolutely. And in police, as part of the collective bargaining agreement, it spells out that at a certain mileage or a certain number of years, I think it may be 8 years, that the vehicle had to be replaced. And heretofore, we have not met that provision within the CBA. We've been fortunate that they have worked cooperatively with us, have not made an issue, filed any kind of challenge against the city for not being able to do that. But with police vehicles starting in this year and moving forward, we have dialed those into the operating budget because we need to meet the CBA provisions.
Thank you, and I appreciate you reminding us of how chaotic that world was prior to us beginning to set aside, I think it was in last year's budget, the first time we set aside $8 million, and continue to do that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it was last year's budget process and in this year's budget.
Right,
Yes.
okay. Also, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like we're starting to do something similar with this building fund that you're talking about so that we could start, we can invest in our future, making smart decisions now about the allocation of these funds and set aside these monies so we're not scrambling to try to have to make these various repairs, whether it's to our complex, whether it's even to this building. Elaborate on that, please.
That is correct, Mayor, but as I think about what is proposed and what is the intent, a two-pronged attack as a first step to set up this building fund, with one-time funding. But the goal, and we probably won't make progress on it until the FY25 budget, is to start budgeting in the operating budget for that. So we're really looking at a two-pronged attack. That is going to be a big number. And so we probably will look at a number of financing mechanism or tools that we will discuss with the board, but we have to get started. It's critical that we take this very first step and get started. If all things go as well as we expect, given the board support of the compensation plan, we're looking at perhaps FY23 being our last year where we have significant savings from having so many positions vacant. Our goal is that in FY24, once the new plan goes into effect, that we're going to be at full staff. And so we won't have the huge salary savings. So we want to take advantage of that windfall now to start building that building fund.
Thank you. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much for being so forward-thinking on these items, and I'm glad that we have the financial capacity to look into them now. My question is about the Parks Bond projects, the GAT funding. I'm curious, I know across the board, just everywhere, construction costs have gone up dramatically over the past few years. So I'm wondering, should we be expecting any additional parks projects that might have the same issues when we get to them?
I'm going to have Ms. Rockwell come up. I don't know how many more have to go on the street, but that certainly is a concern because you're spot on. Construction is just continuing to increase, and so we have that challenge. Leah, if you would come up.
Good morning, Leah Rockwell, Director of Parks and Recreation. Absolutely. The last big project of the bond projects that we have, other than Curry Park, of course, is the South Olive tennis court renovations. And that should go out on the streets within the next couple of months. And that is one that we are putting in, hopefully, some parameters that there'll be ad alternates in that plan that should we not have the funding to do all of it right at once, we could do a phase 2 and get funding for the ad alternates in the future. But that is the only project right now that we're keeping an eye on, because that will be going out to bid in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Lambert, then Commissioner Ward.
Thank you so much. This is, as expected, very thorough and detailed information here. And I can imagine, because each request is so varied and intricate, that there's a lot of conversation that goes back and forth. But I'm just curious if you could share with us a little bit more about your process for how you evaluate what goes on this list and what doesn't make it on this list.
As part of the budget process, departments submit their operating budget, and then what I call above base, or it would be budget issues, as they like to call them. And that's typically where these kinds of items get submitted. So they fill out a detailed form that, spells out, what the issue is, what kind of quotes they have gotten, estimating the amount of the funding. And then with finance budget team, including Mrs. Souffrant, they put together the comprehensive list. I get all of those requests, and we try to categorize them by order of priority, which ones are the most critical. As an example, the plan that was presented to the board back in April was a portion of the overall request that we got from departments. So that 5.3 million were deemed to be the most critical at that time. It included that 3 million for the seawall pilot project. Now, that one was not part of the budget request, but we knew we had gotten that grant, and we did not want to put the city in a position where we didn't come forward with our match funds. So that was 3 million right off the bat. And then we had some other priority items that where we were trying to, for example, we had part of it in there for paving over at the complex, because the condition of the road there was so severe that the vehicles were being damaged. So we were bleeding on the back end because we had this road that was in a state of disrepair. We had to travel it, bringing vehicles in and out, and they were incurring so much damage. So we're bleeding, on the back end. We wanted to stop that bleeding. We had some concern about liability issues at one of the parks where there were potential trip and fall hazards, and we certainly didn't want to have that condition where the public will be subjected to it. So we look at prioritization in terms of grant requirement, match requirements, or if there are safety hazards for the public, and then certainly the cost impact, that it has on the budget itself and on the back end. And so when you look at that, 5.3 million were all high priority items. And then this is the balance of it from the FY22 list, I believe, no, from FY23 list. We have not yet gotten to budget issues from FY24. So as part of this year's budget submittal, there are some one-time items included as well. But, we have to take it as much as we can digest at a time, big numbers.
Thank you. And can I just clarify? You said that this would wrap up all of the outstanding items from the 23 budget, though?
From FY, I think we had a backlog for maybe FY22 and FY23. This would be all of those items, and so then we would be on FY24.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Ward.
Actually, Commissioner Lambert kind of asked what I was going to ask as well, so I'll just say, you guys make this look easy, and I know it's not, so thank you so much. And I keep thinking about the last time we were here when you talked about having software failure, and so just kudos to you all for your hard work, and I really appreciate it. And in particular, also, I know the people around Gaines Park are really appreciating that giant chunk of money, you know, to the gap funding. That's so important to them, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I believe that wraps it up. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Front, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
It has been a long morning. I don't have anything under Mayor's Matters. Commissioners, do you have anything for the good of the order? Anyone? Okay, I see heads shaking. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your patience during this morning. Thank you.